Sir. Good evening. I would like to welcome everyone to the Henry County Planning and Zoning Advisory Board meeting for Thursday, May the 23rd, 2019. This meeting is being televised on Charter Channel 180 and AT&T UVerse Channel 99. It will air daily at 1 p.m. with an additional airing on Thursday at 7 p.m. A video is available on demand on the county website. Please turn off all cell phones and laptops and set them to vibrate. Anyone wishing to speak tonight, please fill out a public hearing speaking card. A total of 10 minutes will be allowed for anyone speaking in favor of a case, 10 minutes for anyone speaking in opposition of a case. For example, if 10 people wish to speak, they must share the 10-minute slot. When you are speaking, please face the board and address us directly, not the audience. If you turn to speak to the audience, the board will assume you are finished, and we will move on to the next speaker. At this time, we'd like to have the invocation and the pledge by Mrs. King.
Please stand. Gracious God and Heavenly Father, we invite your presence here with us tonight. We ask that you bless our state, our county, and our homes. And we look for truthfulness and clarity in all of the presentations and decisions that are made tonight. In the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, I pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This meeting is now called to order. Do I have a motion for the acceptance of the agenda?
I make a motion to accept.
Have a motion? Second. Have a second? All in favor? Motion carries. Okay. Staff, do we have any comments?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. I just want to state that the rezoning request and the comprehensive plan request for John Jordan Hecht Walker, PC of Stockbridge, for property located east of Highway 1941 and west of Old Highway 3 and Old Griffin Road will not be heard tonight, and that it will be re-advertised for another meeting.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. Well, if that's still all the comments, we'd like to call the first case, please.
Conditional use, CU 1906, Iris Lake Henry, 888 LLC of Peachtree Corners, Georgia, requests a conditional use for property located at 1209 Iris Lake Road, land lots 233, 234, 247, 248, 216, and 215 of the 7th District. The property consists of 141.483 plus or minus acres, and the request is for an outdoor adventure park in District 1, and the report is presented by Mrs. Yuritsa Nieves, Planner 2.
Good evening, Chair and board members.
Good evening.
This conditional use request is for property located at 1209 Iris Lake Road, as highlighted in green in your exhibit books and as seen on the overhead. The conditional use request is to allow outdoor amusement on the subject property. The applicant proposes to utilize the subject property for the development of an outdoor adventure park. As per the applicant's letter of intent, the park would include amusements in the form of zip line courses, climbing towers, trails, and other outdoor recreational uses. In addition to the recreational uses, the applicant proposes to develop 20 rustic lodging units in the form of cabins and tree houses, each of which will have its own bathroom and be on a septic. The existing structures on the property would be used to support the proposed use in the form of clubhouses, meeting spaces, offices, and other supporting uses. The recreational activities proposed are permitted by the ULDC with an approved conditional use. Any lodging facilities must comply with ULDC development standards for RV parks and campgrounds. So staff has evaluated the applicant's request and recommends approval with 7 conditions, which I'll place on the screen. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Does the board have questions for staff? Any questions? Okay. If not, we'd like the applicant to come forward, please. Sir, please state your name and address for the record. Okay.
My name is David Bursell. I'm with We Partner, and the business address is 7094 Peachtree Industrial Boulevard in Peachtree Corners, Georgia. Can we give our presentation up here? So I have with me also this evening, where'd you go? Mr. Michael Holder. Michael is the president of American Adventure Park Systems. They would be the operator of the outdoor adventure park, and we'll have him, if it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman, say a few words about his operation as part of our presentation.
That's fine.
Sure. So first I want to take a second and introduce our company. We Partner is a real estate investment and development company. We are, as I said, based in Peachtree Corners in the metro Atlanta area. We are privately owned, and all of the properties that we own are in metro Atlanta. We're a community-focused company that takes pride in the cleanliness, the environmental responsibility, and the community aspects of our developments. We own commercial and residential properties around the region. Here in the city of McDonough, we own a number of rental houses in the Iris Lake Village subdivision, and we have other properties around Henry County and the city of Hampton that we have acquired and are looking at for future development and investment opportunities. We are deeply invested in the county. We're deeply invested in our tenants and our residents, and we really want to do something great for the community here. So our property at Iris Lake, if we can advance that. Okay. Well, I'll talk a little bit about the concept here before talking about the property. So we've been thinking for a while with the Iris Lake property. We've owned it for close to 2 years and weren't really sure what the intent was. This is the old Milner Estate near Iris Lake Road and King Mill Road. As Ms. Nieves said, it's about a 141-acre site that has a 22-acre lake on it, beautiful woods. It's a really special property. And in taking a look at the property and what we'd like to do with it, we really wanted to do something that protected the natural beauty of it, but also was something really special for the community that would create a fun and interesting outdoor recreation opportunity. So last year, in doing our research on what we'd like to do here, I came across historic Banning Mills in Whitesburg, Georgia, in Carroll County, and called up Mr. Holder and explained who we were and what we were. And we've been talking many times. We actually had a company retreat out at Banning Mills last fall. It's a really special and exciting place. If you haven't been, I would encourage you to visit. And it really combines a lot of great elements. You've got the outdoor adventure, the natural beauty, and really just being out in nature. We really believe as a company in getting people out in the community, not having people sit in their houses and stare at electronic devices, especially kids. And this was a really fun opportunity for us as a company to get away from the office, go out in nature, do something fun, do something that frankly a few people were scared of doing, but they had fun anyway. And we really came away from it saying, this is what we want to do at Iris Lake. So over the past few months since then, we've been putting this plan together to develop this outdoor adventure park on our site here in Henry County. So again, our property, as you can see on the screen, is located between exits 216 and 212. It's just south of here. It's only about 2 or so miles from where we are right now. So it's a really convenient location. It's just off of I-75 from both of those exits, but it's very isolated feeling once you get there. You get on the property, you turn the corner, you see the lake, you see the trees, and you feel like you've entered an entirely different type of place, but yet it's still close to all of the amenities around McDonough and Locust Grove, which we think is really important for something that will cater to visitors coming into the area as well as to local residents. So as I said, the site is 141 acres total. The lake itself is the entirety of Iris Lake East. Iris Lake West is on the other side of Iris Lake Road, and there are 2 existing residential subdivisions on either side of it, which would be just below what's there in the aerial. You know, the lake is very nice. It's got excellent water quality. The dam is in great shape. We actually checked it out with the state dams office in downtown Atlanta, that everything checks out with the integrity of the dam. You know, the water, you know, I let my kids swim in it, as do my colleagues, and it's just a really nice and special place. There are 2 homes on the property. There's a small ranch house up by the road frontage, and there's a larger lake house at the rear of the property. The view on the bottom right is the view from the porch of the lake house out towards the lake, so I think it speaks for itself. And we want to take these houses and incorporate them into our plan, use them as clubhouses and office space and meeting space for the site. And so the people who would be using the site for outdoor recreation and overnight lodging would have a place to come and hang out and eat dinner and just enjoy sitting on the porch and looking out at the lake. So as for our concept, the next several slides present what the outdoor recreational park would actually look like. It's kind of hard to see on here, but you'll see it in the next slides, that we're proposing 2 different zip line courses. One would be an extreme zip triangle that goes with the 3 different lines over the lake. Each of those zip lines would be about 1,000 feet in length, so close to a quarter mile. And then there would also be a canopy tour on the bottom right, which would have 6 smaller zip lines with some canopy walks in between, and that was the image from an earlier slide when you saw somebody up on a rope cable bridge is what the canopy walk would look like. We would also have a mix of tree houses and cabins, which, as were described, would be rustic lodging units. Each would, in fact, have its own bathroom and whirlpool tub, and these are exactly the types of units that Mr. Holder has at his property out in Carroll County. So if you have questions specifically about those, he'd be happy to answer them. We also have rock climbing walls and a free fall tower, which isn't a true free fall, but it simulates it. So this is what the zip lines over the lake would look like. You can see you climb up a tower, get on the zip line equipment, and go zipping across the lake. You'd be about 20 to 50 feet above the surface of the lake at any point during the ride. The canopy tour, this is what it would look like. It would be designed to really get you between and among the trees. So it would, make excellent use of the thick forest cover we have there and the creek that runs through the property. So a portion of it would go over the creek and a portion of it would go alongside the creek. And this is the image at the left is a sketch of what the rock wall and climbing tower would look like. And the picture on the right is an actual photo from Banning Mills and what a similar tower looks like there. The lodging units, we're proposing, again, 20 units. We don't know the exact mix of cabins and tree houses, but the treehouse unit on the top right there is what's at historic Banning Mills. There's a rope bridge to get into it, and then once you get in it, it looks like a hotel room, but you're several, like 20, 30 feet up in the trees. Actually had a relative of one of my coworkers say she felt like a bird when she was inside the unit. So I'll turn it over now to Mr. Holder, and he can talk a little bit about his company and the management of it. Our proposed structure here is we would be the primary owner of the property, and American Adventure Park Systems would manage it. They'd be responsible for all installation of all of the equipment, all of the safety precautions that go into building and maintaining outdoor adventure equipment. They would also do the marketing and day-to-day management of the site. So
Okay, let's
with your
do
permission, yes.
We'll have the board address questions to you.
Sure.
And we'll use his time as 10 minutes in favor of your case. Okay?
That will work just fine.
Okay.
So
All right.
if I may then just very quickly, Mr. Holder's company, in addition to Banning Mills, which has been in operation now for over 20 years, they operate similar outdoor recreation courses in, is it 9 different states now?
7 states,
10
different parks.
Thank you. 7 states, 10 different parks around the country. They're active at the national level in setting the safety standards for these outdoor adventure parks, and are, really take safety and the health of people using their equipment very seriously. And they conduct intensive safety training for all park staff.
Okay.
So this is now the site plan that we have submitted along with our conditional use application. You can see at the bottom left of the site there, the existing house, and there's also the existing lake house on the bottom right end of the lake. We would have a paved parking lot at the front. There is an existing driveway kind of in the middle of the property at the bottom left corner of the lake that has a gravel road that goes back to the main part of the site. We would intend to improve that road, make it a little bit safer for vehicles to drive on, and then create other smaller parking areas towards the rear of the site where the lodging units would be. So I guess I'll leave that up on the screen and happy to take questions.
All right. Does the board have questions for the applicant? Okay. Mr. Okay. Mr. Richard, go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to know if you have done any traffic studies relative to your proposed development, or perhaps based on your experience with similar facilities, and then also about how many parking spaces do you anticipate would be needed?
Sure. We have not done a traffic study. We're basing our assumptions about usage on the actual usage at historic Banning Mills. The way that works is people don't just go there and show up and say, okay, I'm here to zip line. Typically, they take reservations, and they know that they have a certain amount of capacity each day to get people on the equipment. It's very labor intensive and time intensive. There's a lot of preparation in terms of getting on the gear, getting the safety presentation. So I don't know the exact number. Perhaps Mr. Holder could answer that. But typically, it would be very rare that more than 100 people would come and go from the site in any one day, even on the busiest day of the year. So the traffic impacts would be minimal. If we need to document this from Banning Mills or some of their other sites, we'd be happy to do that. As to the question about parking, the parking that we showed on here was sized to the standards of I believe it was an assembly space, because there isn't a real true indoor use here. So what we did is we took the square footage of the existing lake house, which I believe is about 3,000 square feet, and there is a standard in your ordinance about number of parking spaces relative to the square feet of the largest indoor assembly space. So that worked out to be, I believe, 60 off-street parking spaces is what we're showing in the plan at the main lot, the paved lot in front. As I said, the gravel drive would lead to additional parking near the lake house at the rear of the site.
Any other questions, Mr. Richard? No. Okay. Ms. King?
Seasonal or year-round open?
It would be open year-round, and again, Mr. Holder can speak to his other operations, but they are busy all year-round at most of their locations.
So who's the target audience? Is it more designed for like corporate team building events or general public? And typically, do people come for just one day, or do they stay like a weekend?
I think at this point it would be appropriate to have Mr. Holder step in if we're asking
we'll wait.
questions
We'll-
about
because
operations.
we'll-
Okay. Yes.
I'll come back.
Sure.
All right.
We have food service there?
We would not have a kitchen. We would envision having, the opportunity for people to order in food, and then, the outdoor lodging units, we would have, fire pits available to them, but it wouldn't be a restaurant per se.
Any additional questions? Yes, Mr. Brown.
The units that you're going to have, they're not going to have kitchens inside of them?
No, it's like a small hotel room. So if we can, I'll go back to it's the image on the bottom right. I know you can't see all of it, but there's, a bed, a sink, and a toilet, a shower, and a tub. And there wouldn't be a kitchenette or anything in the unit. But again, these are rustic units, like you're at a campground. So there'd be an opportunity to cook out or, bring your own food, or again, being so close to both McDonough and Locust Grove as it is, an opportunity to order in food. We wouldn't rule out having, some sort of food trucks come for the site if that's what we need, but we do not want to go through the process of having to have a full-service commercial kitchen on the site. We don't think that's necessary here.
Okay. Then the other question, you said there would be probably a maximum of 100 visitors per day. Does that include the lodging members?
Yes, it does. But again, I don't want to commit to an exact number. I'd rather have Mr. Holder address how his operations work now.
Okay.
I have maybe a couple of questions. One, you mentioned the lake house. What's the capacity of the lake house, and will it be used for events?
We will not lease the space out for, weddings or special events or anything like that. It will have meeting rooms that could handle corporate groups that are coming for smaller events like that, but it would not be designed for events of more than 25 people. The lake house itself is quite large. If I go back to that image, that porch you see out there was set up for a lunch with about 20 people at it. And, we may look into expanding the porch so it can accommodate even more people than that, because that's where people would come in the morning if they're staying in the lodging units to gather and prepare for the day.
Okay. So the lake house, the max capacity of the lake house would be approximately?
You could probably, just as it is now, it's a big open room, probably get about 50 people or so in, the main living room, which is attached to that porch that you see there. But we would not use the bedrooms in the lake house as lodging units. We would use them as meeting rooms, or possibly as spa treatment rooms or things like that.
Okay. All right. And I think you mentioned it. Who actually regulates this type event?
I think that would be a question for Mr. Holder.
Okay. All right. Okay. Do we have any additional questions? Okay. And Mr. Richard?
Yes, what would be the hours of operation? Would this be a 24-hour operation, or
Yeah.
say open till 10 o'clock at night, or,
Yeah, so the lodging obviously would have to be an overnight operation, but at Historic Banning Mills, they actually close their gate at nighttime, and obviously you're not going to zip line it in the dark in the woods, so that stops before sundown. But again, Mr. Holder can answer the specifics about that, but they do close the gate at a certain hour and not let people in or out.
All right. Any additional questions for the applicant? Okay. Well, at this time, we'd like to allot 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in favor of this case. And-
Thank you.
Yes.
My name's Mike Holder. It's nice to meet you. I always wanted to come look at your beautiful complex here. I'm very impressed with the staff on this side. They're efficient. I like that. We have been in the zipline business now for zipline and adventure park business for about 20 years. We were doing it long before anyone else in North America was doing it. I learned to build zipline and rope bridges in the Army at Fort Benning. I was in the Ranger Battalion there, 3rd Ranger, and started flying after that. I wised up a little bit and started flying for the Army, and ended my career at Dobbins Air Force Base in the Guard. So I spent 24 years, counting 14 years in the Guard, serving the state of Georgia. I'm homegrown, and we also are partners with DNR. We build and operate the parks for Amicalola and Unicoi and Alabama State Parks, DeSoto, Gunnersville, Wind Creek, the Myrtle Beach Authority. We do the big park in the middle of Myrtle Beach, and 2 in Kentucky and other parts of the world. And we help design and build other parks for other people too. We kind of learned things the hard way. There was no one to learn from, so we had to do a lot of trial and error. And we think we came up with a real good plan because everybody emulated us. There's probably 2,000 parks in North America now, and we knew there was fixing to be a lot of regulation and a lot of things coming down on us, so we became part of the ASTM program that developed the rules and regulations for the aerial parks and zipline business. Our engineers in our department helped write the state programs that are operating now that are coming online. Georgia does not have a regulation code yet. It's coming though. It'll be in the next couple of years. Tennessee just came online, Kentucky, South Carolina, Maryland is next week, Florida, and of course California and New York. They have programs. They're just mostly about big fees though. They don't really have anybody that comes out and looks at the park. They have someone like me come and look at it and give them a report. I'm a level 3 inspector, certified by ACCT. I'm the chair of the certifying board for the world for ACCT, and I am a voting member of ASTM 2959. Any questions? I know there's a couple I don't remember that I need to answer.
Well, let me say, typically, we don't address questions for someone speaking in favor of the case, but there's an exception today, being that you have all the information we need. So I'm going to ask the board to, if you have questions, go ahead.
I know earlier he said that the dam had been inspected and is of good quality. There's a lot of construction that's going on in this particular area here with warehouses and things like that. How do you check the water quality to ensure that it's at a safe level for people to be around?
Well, that's not something we normally check as running the park. There isn't an established swimming area there yet, correctly? Is that correct? But the lake quality itself is checked by the state. You could have the state health come in and check the water. We do it out at Banning Mills every now and then, but it's usually for wildlife, not usually for people being in it. Usually if it's good for wildlife, people can canoe and boat and things like that in the lake.
So the inspection process is not done by your the company that you represent, nor is there,
No.
nor do we have regulation currently in the state that would regulate an event like that you have planning.
The state EPD would make sure your water quality is good. They can be called in to check the water too, but there's not a program in place now for checking water quality in the lakes. Swimming pool's a whole different story.
Who's your target audience? Corporate team building events, general public? How long do normally people stay? Is it a one-day pass? I can stay for the weekend. Obviously, you have the accommodations, lodging accommodations. Who's your target audience? Is it more corporate or anybody?
It's a little of both. Corporate's probably about 20%. Then you would have families that would be bringing people in, either a day group or overnight. Day group is the transient that come in, they do it, they have fun with their kids, or they have a cabin to have fun with, or they usually stay about 4 hours and they move on to do something else. If they're coming there to do an adventure or ziplining, they're usually on the property for about 3 to 4 hours,
Okay.
counting everything. And then their parking spot is empty and somebody else comes in.
And then how do you market the business? Obviously, you have a website,
Well, we have about 600 keywords that we use.
so it's going to pop up.
Everything.
Okay.
Yeah, oh yeah, a lot
On
of
Google.
them.
And then you have to clear some of the trees to make room for the zip lines.
We surgically clear. We actually have arborists on staff that go in and we surgically cut the limbs and the trees that have to be cut, especially ones that are dangerous. If we have to take out some bigger trees, we'll set a pole instead of using a tree so we can circumvent around those areas that could be endangering old growth trees. We try to stay away from old growth trees as much as we can.
How long of a process is that? Like, how long would it take you to do that work?
To build a canopy
Yes.
tour walk is about 2 months.
Okay. And then what about security? I know you mentioned the gate is going to close at night. Do you have any additional security
Security
Guards.
for access points.
for people who are staying there up in those old tree houses, all alone, isolated up with one access point?
Right, usually you have an automated gate and they have a card to go in and out.
Okay.
If there needs to be other security, there's several services that will bring in people that
So
you
like
pay.
security guards, you might.
Not 24 hours a day,
Right,
special
that's fine.
occasion.
Yeah, I'm
Right.
just, would you do that? That's an option.
Yes,
Yeah.
oh yes, all the time.
And then I guess I have a question for staff. Where's the closest fire station in case there's an emergency, somebody falls into the lake?
I would not have that.
Ms. Steve, I know that the fire station only one is right here, and it's approximately 2 miles away.
Okay. Just saying.
It's pretty close.
It might happen.
Oh yeah, all the time. Let me just talk a little bit about that. I know I'm running out of time here.
Okay.
All of our guides are not just guides. They have to learn to read people. They have to psychologically be aware of what's going on, and they are wilderness first responders. So they're requalified every 6 months. I mean, a wilderness first responder means you have to sustain for an hour if you're in a remote location, and they're card carriers. So, we're very aware of people being remote and having to do high rescue. They're mountain high rescue trained also.
Mr. Richard?
Your site plan is still pretty conceptual, but I think you've generally shown where these residences would be, but have you had any kind of evaluation of the soil conditions on that property that would accommodate all these additional septic tank systems and field systems?
Right. I haven't personally, no, but David, you guys did a perk test, right? And soils maps?
When we acquired the property,
Right.
we were given soils information.
All the soils analysis have been done prior to them acquiring the property, and they have them. I know exactly what you're talking about. I built a lot of houses. I know how that goes.
Yes. Hi, thanks and welcome. You had mentioned earlier there were some regulatory agencies that you volunteer with, and you sit as chair on a few different organizations. The ASDM, can you tell me what that is?
That's the organization that engineers usually get all their information from, and it's a technical, like say you have standards for the cement in this building. They quote from the ASTM, ANSI, and the ANSI standards for those standards, and it's a locality type thing. And the IBC building code, International Building Code for all areas are drawn from ANSI and ASTM standards.
Gotcha.
Now,
So this is a resource of information. Is it also a regulatory agency to where they would send someone out to inspect it after it's built?
no, that's local.
That's
They
local.
pull from those standards to make the local inspectors know what to inspect. They'll cite, the local inspector will cite the framing ANSI code for a building that's a residential building that's 3-story, and it has to have 2x6s every 1 foot instead of a standard 16 on center. That comes from an ASTM standard.
Gotcha. You had mentioned also in your statements earlier that you said Georgia does not have something, but Tennessee does.
Tennessee does, yes.
Tell me what it was that Tennessee has that Georgia doesn't have in regards to this.
The different states go through their different departments. Kentucky is Department of Agriculture. Tennessee is Parks and Recreation. And they pick different ones which best suits the state itself. And they're using ACCT, Association Challenge Course Technology Inspectors and Standards, to be able to set their staff up and be able to go out and look and know what they're looking at. Normally they'll pick someone like us to come in and educate them on that, or do the inspection and sit down with them and show them what it's looking like. The reason it's such a weird animal is because inspectors are not used to climbing up in trees, putting their hands and fingers in the little joints and feeling the cable. That's something they don't normally do, and that's something you have to do as an aerial park inspector. You got to put your hands on everything.
Do they issue a certification that you have to get your insurance and to open to the public? Or is it basically a standard you refer to when you design it and build it, but after it's built, is that it? Or
No. Almost all insurance agencies now that issue insurance for this type of activity require an annual inspection, and any negatives worked off within 30 days, and they have to have a copy of it before they issue a new insurance certificate. Now, a lot of states are requiring that copy also.
just want to make sure if we're dangling people up in the air on wire that.
Yep, exactly. We know what you're talking about.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Richard?
I think this is a question for staff. The property that's directly north of this site, that's on, I think it's on King Mill Road, what is the future proposed land use for that property, as well as the one that's directly below the site that fronts on Iris Lake Road towards the Iris Lake subdivision?
Okay. The subject property and those directly adjacent to it have medium-density residential future land use designation.
And how many homes per acre would that be?
Medium density allows up to 6 dwelling units per net acre.
Thank you.
All right, I have an additional questions. You mentioned, let's talk about that regulating agency. You said, is it AST or?
It's not a regulating agency, it's
Okay.
a standard-setting agency. If
Okay.
you'd like, I would, if I had your email, I'll
And
send
you
you
were
guys
speaking
the
of
link.
ANSI, right?
No, you got ANSI and ASTM, and they cross-relate and
Okay.
coordinate with each other, and actually, they'll let ANSI set a standard on something, and they will quote from that standard in this standard.
Okay. And this would be considered an amusement park, correct?
Yeah, it's ASTM 2959, which is a completely new category, but it's not amusement park. It's aerial parks and zip lines. It's a completely new category.
Okay, so it would be different from a park, say like Six Flags? Or
Yes.
it wouldn't
Yes.
fall up under those guidelines, or?
Unless they had a zip line.
Okay,
And if they had a zip line, you rode in a harness with a helmet, had protective gear, it would fall under 2959.
okay.
Mr. Chair, there may not be specific standards for the zip lining in Georgia at this time, but they would still have to meet general life safety codes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, right, I got you. Additional question?
Please don't feel that we're slicing you open here.
I'm
I
good.
just want to get good clarification on this. So if this is approved and say the facility moves forward, it's built, the fire department comes in and gives a CO, he can open for business, correct? Is there anywhere at any time that this agency you're talking about has to also approve the work before he can open to business?
Well, as the applicant stated, there are no state regulations particular for this zip lining. So it will be up to the local regulations. So the applicant would have to go through the plan review process. He would need a development permit. He would have to meet all of our Unified Land Development Code standards, all of our building code standards, all of our life safety code standards, and so forth. There would be no skimping on the regulations.
But there's no separate entity, it's part of the normal process.
Yes, so as the applicant stated, there is no state regulations particular for zip lining at this present time in the state of Georgia.
I think there's a danger in using the term agency because that implies government. I think you're talking about groups or nonprofits or somebody, a group of people who get together, who set up guidelines for
Guidelines and
facilities
standards,
like
correct.
yours, but it's not a government agency.
No. Now,
Right, Better Homes and Gardens or something, whatever.
now, ACCT.
Good housekeeping.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
ACCT does use those in their standard Change 9 ANSI standards, and that course would be certified ACCT, and it would be inspected by ACCT Level 1 and 2 inspectors, which they have to register that inspection with the insurance agency covering them. Now, it's coming in Georgia. It's probably, I'd say, within the next year.
So state lawmakers, if they do craft any sort of legislation that would dictate guidelines for a facility like this, would
Yes.
probably refer to those organizations to get ideas. and-
99% of the
Yeah,
time.
they're coming,
Yes.
yeah.
In fact,
As far as the ASTM standards, as the applicant mentioned, there are standards for concrete, there are standards for ballpoint pens, there would be standards for this as
Right.
well. I think you cited the actual code. And as an aside, if it's the pleasure of the board, you could certainly consider conditioning the location to meeting the intent of the Highway Corridor Overlay District as far as development standards go.
I'm sorry, say that again.
You could certainly consider, if it's the pleasure of the board to approve this request, you could certainly consider a condition that would require the applicant to meet the intent of the Highway Corridor Overlay District. And that would be appropriate because this location doesn't fall within the boundaries of the Highway Corridor Overlay District. And if that's something that you would like to see, that would need to be a condition.
Okay, gotcha. I got you. All right. Any additional questions for the applicant? I'm sorry, for the gentleman speaking in favor? Okay. All right, thank you, sir. All right. At this time, we'd like to allot 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in opposition of this case.
And Mr. Chair, it may also be appropriate if someone wanted to speak in favor using the additional 4 minutes.
And that's correct. We do have additional time for anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this case. Okay, please come forward, sir. We have 4 minutes that we'll allot for anyone speaking in favor. Thank you, Stacy.
Yes, sir.
My name is Tim Housecombe, Keller Williams real estate agent, working for a piece of property that's 50 acres. Inside of this property, it's L-shaped around. I don't know if you can do that. See that piece there that comes out with that lake on it right up from there? It's right with it there. And yes, that one there. And it's 50 acres. And we've actually checked for to hook into the sewer there. And in order to do that, you have to put a whole new pumping station in, which is going to be $500,000 to $700,000 to improve this land they have and our land. So by them doing this with septic, that eliminates them trying to jump on a sewer and put a bunch of houses in there, which I think is excellent for this area. Also, I just spent 3 hours with the owners of this property. They know I was coming, and that what they're getting ready to do seems like it would fit right in there without any problems with the 50 acres that they have. But the sewer thing is key, because if someone wanted to say, oh, we want to put 6 houses per acre, they have to spend $700,000 just for a pumping station before they get approved to put all that in there. It's not going to work out. So that being the case, this is a perfect thing to put in there with about 20 septic tanks, I think is what I heard right. And it'll fit perfect in there. And it'll keep, the woods around and keep the area like it is. And the traffic there, because I'm there, I was just there today, I'm there all the time, is very minimal. So for them bringing in those cars, it's not going to be a big thing. And where those warehouses are that they're putting all around that area right there, they're really not going to be people running in and out of them warehouses. They're going to have, trucks going in and out certain ways. But it seems to me like this is a very genius idea and very fitting to the area. That would be good. So.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Okay, we have approximately 2 minutes. Well, a minute, 54 seconds. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this case? Okay. If not, we'd like to allot 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in opposition of the case.
Hi, my name is Kelly Coleman. I own the property at 285 Iris Lake Road, which is 12 acres down from there on the racetrack end. My biggest concern with anything we're doing in the county, especially right here, is the traffic. And I live there, and I work here in McDonough, and I have a 7-mile commute every day across 20. So I can tell you firsthand, that traffic right there is terrible. The truck traffic, which I know on both ends there, on Kings Mill and on the racetrack end of Iris Lake, there are no truck signs. But I can tell you there are tractor and trailers coming up and down that road every day. And also on our end of Iris Lake, the speed limit is 35 miles an hour. And I can tell you that no one goes 35. Last September, we own the property there that has the white fence there at 285, and last year, September, a young girl that lives up on Whitaker come flying over the hill, and I'm in the blind drive too. If you're coming this way towards racetrack, I'm the blind driveway, me and my neighbor across the street. She took out our whole fence. By the grace of God, she was not hurt. But the speeding through there, the truck traffic through there now is a big deal since the warehouses have been put in there. The school traffic through there, and again, last Thursday with what happened on 75, and it seems like this is an everyday occurrence now, if 75 backs up, people are on 42 trying to get through. They've discovered that you can cut through Harris and up Iris Lake, so Iris Lake has become a cut-through road. So honestly, I do not see, we need a traffic study if they're going to do this. It's a beautiful piece of property. It's a great concept, but I can't get my head wrapped around why you'd want to put more traffic right there in that area. So that is my biggest concern, is the traffic and bringing more people right there. And the truck traffic is a problem there. And I spoke to Henry County about it when they worked the wreck that day, and they did sit out and try, and they do sit out and try. But Henry County Police Department, as y'all know, is so understaffed. They can't be everywhere, and I was basically told unless they see the truck traffic, they can't do anything about it. But it is a very big problem there on Irish Lake now with the warehouses and the continued development around there. And I can only see it getting worse. So I would like you to very considerately study the traffic there before you put anything else in that corridor, because we simply just cannot take the traffic anymore over there. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition of the case? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
My name is John Howard. I'm extremely hard of hearing, so I might have to get my wife or daughter up here to interpret what y'all asked me. But I bought this property. I live on 235 Irish Lake Road. I bought this property. I moved on this property in February 1980. And back then, I bought it from J.P. Price. I don't know if any of you remember him, but I bought it from him. Excuse me. And back then, the traffic on Irish Lake Road there, what would happen, the traffic for a week on Irish Lake Road there would probably take place in 10 to 15 minutes today. The traffic is terrible. And as y'all are rezoning and building things, and you need to really, really, really consider the traffic. See, the infrastructure is not keeping up with what y'all are doing with the building of the warehouses and so forth. You're not maintaining the roads that we've already got. They're full of potholes, they need resurfacing, but you're building more roads and bringing more traffic in. Now, most any day of the week, you can go up and try to get out on Racetrack Road. And 2 or 3 times a week, it'll probably drive back up all the way up to my driveway, which is 1/4 mile. It'll back up that far for people trying to get out on the Racetrack Road. It's Irish Lake is just a little family community road, and it can't stand any more traffic like they're proposing. This traffic would come from all sorts, all over the state of Georgia, and that is the main concern. Now, from my corner there with Tommy Ricks to my corner over there with Neil Tomlinson, Henry County only has a 30-foot right-of-way. They only have a 30-foot right-of-way in that road. And the city of McDonough here a few years back was going to build another road coming in on the top of the hill over there in front of my daughters. And I told them, my wife and I, we have turned down a substantial amount of money for this property. I mean, a substantial amount. And for Henry County to try to get some of it to widen the road or something, that would cost you a substantial amount to do that too. So that is, and folks, when you're doing all this planning and all, you need the traffic. That's the most important thing. It's what it's bringing in, and is the road system going to handle this traffic? Is the roads in such a way that they will handle the traffic? And that's the most important thing that y'all have to consider. this is a good thing, I think. But consider the traffic that it's going to bring in and what it's going to do with the residents in that community. And it's going to be terrible if it comes in like I think that it will. It's going to be terrible for my wife and I, and we're getting on up in age to try to get out and go anywhere. And it'll sort of hamstring us. And I appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir. Okay. We have approximately 3 minutes. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition of this case? Okay. If not, does the board have additional questions for staff or the applicant?
I have one for Mr. Holder.
Okay, Mr. Holder?
I'm guessing you'll bring your own people in to operate the zip lines. How many new jobs do you think you might create?
It's going to be in the range of 20, and we wouldn't bring all of our staff over here. We have key people in our sub-company, which is American Adventure Park Systems. The parent company is Historic Banning Mills. It's a nonprofit, and everything technically runs through American Adventure Park Systems. And our engineer would come over, our trainers would come over and train the trainers, and then they train up the staff, and they'd all be local. So we found that.
Are those full-time jobs or part-time jobs?
There are a lot of part-time jobs, but there is several full-time jobs.
Thank you.
Probably about 20, in the range of 20 or so.
Okay.
Any additional questions? Okay. If not, I have a question for staff. Staff, does this warrant a traffic study, or where are we with the traffic study?
So, the overhead, please. So the last condition, number 7, states owner developer shall provide traffic data from similar sites elsewhere to Henry County Department of Transportation to determine if any other road or right-of-way improvements are to be required. So the last 3 conditions were received by Henry County Department of Transportation as conditions.
Okay, so the conditions are there that dictates if all traffic studies or what need to take place with that.
Yes, so DOT will evaluate that information and they will require them to do whatever requirement they deem necessary.
Okay. Mr. Richard.
Yeah, just a point of information. Of course, Iris Lake a road is built on top of a dam in, I think it was 1995 when Hurricane Alberto, I'm sorry, it was Tropical Storm Alberto hit Georgia, and it seemed like it sat on top of Henry County for about a week, and that caused the dam to break at that time. The road at that time was it was just a dirt and gravel road, and it was on a prescriptive easement, and the county spent a lot of time and effort and cost trying to rebuild that dam, and actually there were some lawsuits against Henry County to rebuild it since it was partly on private property, and so I would be concerned about the entrance and egress into this property, from the dam. There is a rise in elevation as you go southbound, especially, and I think that's something that needs to be looked at very carefully by our Henry County DOT.
Okay. Any additional questions? Okay, if there's no additional question, we'd like to call the case, please.
CU 1906, Iris Lake Henry 888 LLC of Peachtree Corners, Georgia, requests a conditional use for property located at 1209 Iris Lake Road, land lots 233, 234, 247, 248, 216, and 215 of the 7th District. The property consists of 141.483 plus or minus acres, and the request is for an outdoor adventure park in District 1, and the report was presented by Mrs. Yuritsa Nieves, Planner 2.
Okay. We've heard the case. Do we have a motion? Mr. Richard.
Yes, I would like to make a motion to deny the request. There's some concerns about traffic entrance and egress, safety, and I think a more detailed site plan would be needed before this goes on to the county commissioners on an appeal if it is denied. But that's my motion, is for denial.
All right, have a motion. Do we have a second?
A second.
Okay. All in favor? Motion fails. Do we have a motion to, do we have an additional motion? Motion for approval.
We're stuck.
All right, well, I would need an additional motion to obtain additional votes.
That's correct, Mr. Chair, and the fact that you didn't get a motion for approval means that the request is denied.
That's correct.
And also, I would just like to say, if I could, that the applicant has 30 days to appeal this, and will receive that appeal at the Planning and Zoning Department if the applicant so chooses.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, call the next case, please.
Variance VR 1907 Canyon Springs Apartments LLC of Brookhaven, Georgia, requests a variance from development standards for property located at 1873 Jonesboro Road in Land Lot 110 of the 6th District. The property consists of 7.71 plus or minus acres, and the request is to reduce the number of parking requirements. This is District 2, and the report is presented by Ms. Jewel Richardson, Planner 1.
Good evening.
Good evening, Chair and board members.
Good evening.
The variance request is for a property located at 1873 Jonesboro Road. The property is zoned PD within a RM pod. The applicant is requesting a variance to reduce required parking from 446 to 404 to accommodate on-site parking. The applicant applied for administrative waiver to reduce parking only by 5% from 446 parking spaces to 422. This administrative waiver was approved February 15, 2019. With that being said, staff recommends denial of the applicant's request, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Does the board have questions for our staff? Okay. I have one question. Now, are you saying the applicant requested a waiver prior to this case?
Yes, so the applicant submitted a shared parking agreement, which was approved earlier this year. Then they came in for administrative waiver requesting a reduction in parking, and our administrative waivers were only allowed to reduce it by 5%. So that's how they got the approved waiver, so we dropped it down to, I believe, 400 and, what was it?
Administrative waiver for 5% and the shared parking, that actually takes care of the applicant's requirement. It's just that there are other standards that go with the shared parking agreement, and instead of going with that shared parking agreement, the applicant would prefer to request a variance from this board.
Oh, okay.
However, it's not something that we could recommend approval for because they could otherwise develop.
Okay, gotcha, clear. All right. Any additional questions for our staff? Okay.
You saying that you don't recommend it because they could develop? Could you explain that a little more, please?
Right. So there is a list of what we refer to as varianceable items, and they are typically dimensional standards. So, for example, a certain distance for setbacks and so forth like that. This is not one of those varianceable items. And also, between the administrative waiver for 5% that we approved and the shared parking agreement that we approved, the applicant could develop under these approvals, but the applicant would prefer to request that this board vary their requirements so that this shared parking agreement and so forth are not otherwise needed. And so we do recommend denial of this request.
Thanks.
Okay. Does the board have additional questions for staff? Mr. Richard?
Okay, if I understand what you said, that the applicant has chosen not to add parking spaces through the existing agreement, that they prefer to go the variance route, and of course they've already gone before staff for the waiver that would allow them to have I think 422 spaces. Is that correct? But
Yes, the administrative waiver would reduce that requirement to that amount, as I understand. The shared parking agreement actually, as you might imagine, requires a vehicular connection between the two parking areas. And that is also something that the applicant would prefer not to have to do, but it's simply required to share parking under our regulations. And the applicant could, of course, elaborate more on their request.
thank you.
Any additional questions for staff? Okay, if not, we'd like to call the applicant forward, please. Please state your name and address for the record. Good evening.
Kathy Watts Jones, and my resident is in 3379 Kyafton Court, Peachtree Corners, Georgia.
Okay.
And I represent Canyon Springs Apartments.
Okay, you have anything additional you'd like to add to staff recommendation?
Yes, I would like to go through just a little brief history of the project so you can see exactly what our goal is with the project. So this is a picture of the apartments. Oh, is it upside down? Sorry. There. So what we have here, this is the apartment complex, and then there's a point of entry here to come into the complex. And currently, the total required parking is 446 parks, and we had an administrative variance of 22 cars, and then we also bring down the required parking to 424 parks. So the parking provided on site is 400 cars at this time, and then the shared parking with the shopping center was an additional 24 cars, which would bring down the total provided parking to 424 parks. So the entrance to the project is here, and it comes in as we have one point of entrance, and this is it is a gated it's a gated community, and we want to maintain the integrity and the security of the gated community. So that's why we're asking for the board to give us to waive 20 parks, because what happens once if we get this if you grant us this variance, then we would pick up 4 additional parks here and take out the gate that's here for the rear entrance into the apartment complex. So then the required parking would still be the 446, and we already have the administrative variance for 22 cars, and so we were requesting a variance on 20 parking spaces to bring it down to 404, which would be the existing parks on site. But our main concern is that this is a gated community, and we do want to maintain the integrity of the gated community. We want to make it secure. We want to make it safe for all of our tenants when they come in. And then with that additional entrance in the back, because the whole complex has a secure gate completely around it. There is an access walk path here to the retail that's also available on site, and that would be a secure access by tenants. They would have some type of mechanism to get in and out of that gate, whether it's a swipe card or whatever. And we also are going to have tenant parking rules and regulations in their contracts, which are going to be strictly enforced. So, so main goal is to maintain the integrity, the safety, and security of a gated community. And we feel like having this additional point of access will be just a strike against us for that. And we want to make, this is a new concept for Henry County. It's a grand work for future development. This is it's a new urban project that we're bringing in. There's no other project like this in the county that has lifestyle apartment complex, and so we want to maintain that integrity and the safety and security.
Okay. Does the board have questions for the applicant? Okay. I have questions. Now, and this may be for staff. The 5% is based on the shared. The 5% is approved based on the share, which gave you a reduction down to 424, correct?
Not quite, Mr. Chair. The shared parking came after the administrative reduction,
Okay.
which is limited to 5% of the total amount that was required. But that wasn't quite enough, and so the shared parking made up the difference.
Okay. Okay, so you're asking for a variance now based on to get down to the 400?
Yes, so that they would not have to take advantage of the shared parking because that would require the vehicular connection.
Okay.
Which is not desirable apparently to the
And the
applicant.
next question is, how many units would you have to reduce in order to get down to the 400? Or this may be a question for the applicant. Have that came up?
No, we never did look at reducing the number of units. With the current variance and the shared parking agreement, we're at 1.9 parks per unit. What we're proposing would bring it down to 1.81 parks per unit.
Okay. So basically, you guys are against the shared.
No, we're not necessarily against the shared parking. It's just that the requirement of the shared parking is that you have to have direct access
To
the shared parking without going on the public street.
Right, and you have a gate, and you don't want to do that. Your
Well-
property is gated, and you don't want to share it openly.
Right, exactly. We want to keep the
Understood.
property secure.
All right, I understand.
Yes.
Reduction area, all right. Any addition, Mr. Bar, I'm sorry.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you.
It seems to me, that, like when you say 1.8 parking spots per unit,
Yes.
I'm not about trying to be, a jokester or anything, but how would you park a car in a 0.8 of a parking spot? I guess what I'm saying is, by reducing the total number of spots, aren't you underserving your tenants? Because when they rent an apartment, most cars in America, most homes in America these days are two-car homes, basically. To rent that out to someone, wouldn't you want them to have the full access to enough parking?
Well, this is an apartment complex, and it's not really so much considered a residential home where, and then in our mix of units is we have 99 one-bedrooms, we have 112 two-bedrooms, and 12 three-bedrooms. So the total number of bedrooms is going to be 359, and we're proposing 404 parks. So if you had one park per bedroom, you still have an additional 45 parks available for guests. And typically, we're going to have tenant parking rules and regulations. We don't want the complex with a parking lot full of cars that are just covered and people are not using them. So we are going to have strict rules that are going to be strictly enforced, that we have to have an active driver, that those drivers have to be registered. So we are going to put in place everything that needs to make sure that this is an active community.
Thank you.
So you want to keep the gates, I get that. When a tenant signs a lease, will you ask them how many cars they own, how many cars they're going to be bringing, how many vehicles they'll bring onto the property?
Yes.
You keep track of that?
Yes. That we would have a tenant parking rules and regulations agreement.
And is there a limit associated with that? I mean, you tell a tenant, do you have a limit? If someone comes and wants to sign a lease, if you can't have 3 cars?
Yes, they will be told. I don't know exactly what it is right now, but yes, they will be told. They will have to sign a parking agreement as part of the lease.
So what are the parking rules?
They're not exactly in place at this point.
Mr. Richard?
Do you have any plans for compact car spaces that might, it seems like that might help with the overall total parking spaces that you could have there for the apartments?
We really haven't looked into the compact car spaces. I don't know what the requirements are for Henry County for compact cars.
When the development begins, it'll go through a parking review in the building department. So they'll review as far as what parking spaces will be required. But from my knowledge, I don't believe that they would have them create just normal parking sizes. They wouldn't say 10 will be compact and 10, because it would really limit the amount of parking spaces they would have, because all cars aren't compact.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I have to go, Mr. Brown, go ahead.
Do any of the apartments have garages?
No, none of these apartments have garages.
Is there any condition under which you could have some of the apartments to have garages?
These are resort-style apartments, and they will not be developed with garages.
Well, I guess I have to go back to the original questions. Would you guys be open to reducing the units? And I'm not sure how many units, and staff hasn't presented me with that answer, how many units would have to be reduced to actually suffice for your parking. But have you guys considered that, or would you be open to considering that?
We are well in the process of the design at this point, and I don't think that is something that we are open to doing at this point.
Can you state again the number of bedrooms?
359.
359.
Mr. Risher, I'm sorry, Mr. Nelson.
Yes.
The from the BOC approval of the modifications to the master plan for this pod, they have a maximum of 540 units they can have.
540?
Yes.
Okay, which dictates the 446 parking space, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know how many units they would have to reduce to get down to the 400?
No.
Okay.
We have not done those calculations.
Of the 540 units, 300 are already in place at Mandalay.
Oh, okay.
So the most that we could do is 240.
Okay, got it.
So we're doing 17 less than the max.
Okay, all right. Any additional questions for the applicant? Okay. If there's no additional questions, you may be seated, ma'am. At this time, we'd like to allot 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in favor of this case. No one's coming forward. 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in opposition. Again, no one's coming forward. Does the board have additional questions for the applicant or staff? None? Call the case, please.
1907 Canyon Springs Apartments LLC of Brookhaven, Georgia, requests a variance from development standards for property located at 1873 Jonesboro Road, land lot 110 of the 6th District. The property consists of 7.71 plus or minus acres, and the request is to reduce the number of parking requirements in District 2, and the report was presented by Ms. Jewel Richardson, Planner 1.
Okay. We've heard the case. Do we have a motion?
We do, and I'm conflicted, but I'm inclined to ask the board to go against staff recommendation and grant approval of this variance request, VR 1907.
Okay. We have a motion and we have a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Motion carries. Call the next case, please.
Hampton Ordinance 19-1, the amendment to amend multiple sections of Appendix A of the City of Hampton Code of Ordinance, which provides for zoning, to create new code sections to provide for severability, to repeal conflicting ordinances, to provide an effective date, and for other purposes. City of Hampton, presented by Stacy Jordan Rudisell, Chief Planner.
Good evening, Mr. Chair.
Good evening.
Board members. The request before you tonight is a city-initiated ordinance amendment. And I would like to state that the city has a brand-new ordinance that was adopted late last year, and it's very typical once a brand-new ordinance has been used and implemented and taken out, and it's almost necessary for that period to happen in order to understand what changes would need to be made to that ordinance, because nothing's ever perfect, and if you wait for a brand new ordinance draft to be perfect, you'll never adopt it. So it's not unusual to have a broad ordinance amendment such as this one to be brought for the council's consideration. And of course, tonight you're asked to make a recommendation to the council, and we expect for that council meeting to take place on June the 11th at the Hampton City Hall. So I don't intend to go through each of these in great detail, but just broad brush in a summary form. The city's proposed ordinance amendment will actually strengthen the landscaping requirements that are in section 3-17E. It will bring back planned development, which is considered a legacy district under the new code. That's not something that planning staff was quite sure about, because as part of the new code, there are multiple mixed-use zoning districts, which was intended to replace planned development, but it's the understanding of planning staff that the city intends to have a district where the request will come before the city for a concept plan review before the actual rezoning request is made, and this ordinance amendment accomplishes that purpose. Regarding exemptions, this is for campaign signs. And so we, as planning staff, think that that's an excellent idea. We do have some concerns regarding regulating a campaign sign based upon its content, but we'll need to defer to the city attorney for that. Also, it seems like the idea of putting signs generally in the right-of-way is treated, but nothing is allowed in the right-of-way, including signs. So in one instance, that may be already treated, but it wouldn't hurt to treat it again in this ordinance. Regarding definitions, this is the definition of subdivision, and we agree with clarifying the definition of subdivision in the city's zoning code. But when this new code was adopted, zoning was Appendix A, and building was Appendix B, and the subdivision codes were Appendix C, and so the only jurisdiction that we have is over Appendix A. So we actually are not making any recommendation at all regarding Appendix B or C, but we've noted that the city intends for there to be different definitions for subdivision in Appendix A and B and C, and so we're not quite certain why or what's intended to be accomplished by having different definitions for subdivision in these different codes. Regarding porches and stoops, this regulation is strengthened. So for example, whereas today porches and stoops are exempted from the setback requirement, we think that it's very appropriate that this ordinance amendment would require porches and stoops to comply with the setback requirement. Also, regarding the public space requirement, there's just simply a Scribner's error. This Scribner's error directs one to a code section which is not applicable, and this intends to correct that. Regarding timber harvesting, the ordinance is actually relaxed. And so planning staff is not quite certain what's intended, but in conversation that we've had with city staff, it was the intent of the city to bring this for the council's consideration to relax the timber harvesting regulations, and it certainly does that. So recognizing that there will be these discussions and that your recommendation could be just as detailed as you want it to be, we do recommend approval of the city's initiated ordinance amendment. And I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Okay. All right, does the board have questions? I'm going to address Mr. Wolf, and then we'll get to you, Mr. Richard.
Stacy, thank you for the description. I was taking notes as you were talking. You started out this conversation with saying that it was a city-initiated thing. May I ask who initiated it?
Yes, so the ordinance says that regarding an amendment to the zoning code, that any agency of the city can request that. And so we had conversation with the Community Development Department at City Hall. And so that has been our liaison with the city, and we received this request from the Community Development Department. And it's planning staff's understanding that this was presented to the city council for discussion before the final draft was sent to our planning and zoning department.
For a matter of clarification, if that had happened, there would have been a public record of that because it would have been in an open meeting. And it's my understanding that has not happened.
Okay.
So I would like to, I don't know if I'm at a point yet where I'd say table this yet, but I'd like to get clarification on at what level the city council and the mayor was involved in this decision and how it got from the community development office to here without their public meeting knowledge or discussion of it. Because there seems to have been a fallout of communication there,
Yes,
and that makes me leery of this.
Yes, sir, Mr. Moore. And let me just say that we as planning staff and I personally have had a conversation with the city manager at Hampton, and Mr. Cohilas said that he had investigated this and that he was confident that the right steps had been taken, but I can't speak to why it's not showing up in the record of the minutes, so I'm just not able to address that.
I understand. Moving past that point, the concept here is just that the city of Hampton spent about $100,000 getting their zoning rewritten. I think it was a mixture of a partnership of a grant and matched monies. A lot of effort went into that, and it has not fully been implemented yet because it's just now taking effect. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. There's concern that it's being changed before it's implemented. And I get your description earlier that it's a big animal. It's not perfect. If you wait for it to be perfect, it's not ever gonna happen. I get that, but it does make me leery. Going back to my original point, that something that was $100,000 was spent on is being changed. That the city council approved. Now there's a desire for it to be changed, and the city council has not been made privy to it. Not the full council. So. When you say the community development department was your liaison, which that is the proper chain of command through there, for the record, I'd like to make sure that the city council agrees with the the community development office's recommendations and request of your staff, so that it's an approved request.
Yes, sir, and I shared that same concern, which is why when I spoke with the city manager, it allayed my fears.
Understand. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it. That's all I got for now.
Okay. Mr. Richard.
I have a question about, I guess it would be request number 7, where it says covered porches, whether enclosed or not, and stoops shall be considered as part of the building and shall not project into the required front, side, or rear yard. Now, just theoretically, suppose someone wanted to have a porch that, stuck out, 10 or 15 feet, that would push the living part of the house further back into the rear yard. And I know a lot of ordinances have a regulation that allows, say, a porch or a stoop to, say, extend up to 5 feet into the front setback. In other words, encroach 5 feet past the front yard building line, towards the street. And it seems to me that at least theoretically, you could have a large porch that would push the living part of the house back where you wouldn't have any rear yard. So
I understand, Mr. Risher. It's been typical for a porch or a deck that is attached to the structure to be considered a part of the primary structure, to be considered a part of the house for the purpose of meeting setback requirements. And so it's my understanding that this new ordinance makes the change which would exempt porches and stoops from meeting the setback requirement. And so it was the intent of this ordinance amendment to again look at porch and stoops as a part of the house for the purpose of meeting setback requirements. And that's not to say that one couldn't apply for an administrative waiver within a certain percentage, but it did seem appropriate to planning staff to require porches and stoops to meet the same setback as the house.
well, yes, but it's still not part of the living area. It's really an appendage, to the space that people live in. And as I said, I think it's often been required that porches and stoops can extend past the front building line a certain small number of feet, like 5 feet or 8 feet or something like that, and that would still be uniform with, say, with other houses, in the same block.
Yes, sir, and that would still be allowed, but only with an approved administrative waiver.
Well, again, going on a case-by-case basis, there might be, some kind of, I guess selection towards, certain people, but not others. So it should be uniform.
Yes, sir.
I think one way or the other, but that's just my comment on it. So.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Any additional questions for staff? Okay. Well, in this case, Stacy, we would like to. I don't think we have anyone from Hampton or applicant here, do we?
It's my understanding that we don't, but it would be, since this is a public hearing, to call for comment.
Yes. At this point, we'd like to allot 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in favor of this amendment. Okay. Anyone wishing to speak in favor? If not, we'd also like to allot 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in opposition of the amendment. Okay. Any additional questions for staff? Okay. If not, call the case, please.
19-01, to amend multiple sections of Appendix A of the City of Hampton Code of Ordinance, which provides for zoning to create new code sections, to provide servability, to repeal conflicting ordinances, to provide an effective date, and for other purposes. The City of Hampton, presented by Stacy Jordan Rudisell, Chief Planner.
Okay. We've heard the case. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I do. First, I would like to make a polite statement. Staff, you guys do an amazing job, okay? Y'all have been asked to give a recommendation on this, and you did your part. But in light of that, I believe, because I've been a councilman and I've been a mayor, and I know that they want this at their level to have the scrutiny over it, especially in a public meeting, I'm going to make a motion to respectfully go against staff's recommendation and deny this on the grounds that it needs to be presented to the council in public. And then if they send the package back to us, then we'll vote on it.
So we have.
So
a
my
motion.
motion is to deny it on those grounds.
Okay. Do we have a second? I have a second by Mr. Risher. All right, any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay. Call the next case, please.
Mr. Chair, the other cases were tabled.
Oh,
so
okay.
This should be the end of our agenda.
Okay. All right. Have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. So be it.